I remember the heat first, a dry and impossible thing that came through the windshield of my cast trailer. It felt like standing too close to an open oven, and I thought the air conditioning had broken again. I was in full costume for Ashen World, the synthetic rags of Jeremiah scratching my skin, and I was going over my lines for the third act. My phone was on the small table next to a bottle of water, and I was ignoring a text from my ex-wife about our daughter's recital. The heat grew worse, and through the tinted window I saw the sky over the distant hills turn a deep orange color that did not look natural. The lights in the trailer flickered once, then went out. My phone went dark too. Outside, a car alarm started blaring, then another, until a dozen of them were screaming all at once. Then, one by one, they died, leaving behind a silence that was more frightening than the noise. That was the flash fire. That was the day the performance became real. I never got to make the call back to my daughter. Now I stand on the hood of a rusted-out car, and my flock of 30 souls looks up at me. We have just returned from a scavenging run, a dangerous trip to a collapsed grocery store that my visions guided us to. The cans of beans and corn feel heavier than gold in our hands. The flock is gaunt, their faces smudged with dirt, but their eyes are fixed on me. They see a prophet, a man touched by a divine fire. They see Jeremiah. I see the face of the stage manager in the third row, the one person you have to convince for the whole show to work. The Sky Father gives, and the Sky Father takes away, my voice booms, a trained and resonant sound that I spent years perfecting at Juilliard. It carries across the silent ruin of the parking lot that surrounds our library. He saw your faith. He saw your toil. And he has rewarded our belief with sustenance. This food is a covenant. It is not to be hoarded. It is not to be squandered. It is to be shared, as we share our breath, as we share our hope. I finish the sermon with a final, sweeping gesture. They bow their heads in unison, a gesture of thanks. Alara approaches me as I step down from the car, her movements sure and quiet. She looks at the cans being distributed, then back at me. "We would have starved if not for your vision, Jeremiah," she says, her voice low and certain. "Your belief is what keeps us human. Without it, we are just animals fighting for scraps." Her words land with a physical weight. I nod slowly, my face a mask of serene wisdom that I have practiced in broken mirrors. I look out at my followers, at the families huddled together, at the children chewing on cold beans straight from the can. They believe in me completely, and that belief is the only thing standing between us and the howling nothing of this new world. I feel the cold terror of the fraud deep in my gut, a familiar actor's dread magnified 1,000 times. I am their god, and I am running out of script. Our life in the ruined library is built on ritual. Jeremiah's doctrines are the only law. We wake before the sun paints the dusty sky, its usual sick brown. The first water detail purifies what we have collected from the rain barrels, a slow and careful process. The guards take their positions on the roof, silent figures watching the empty streets. Alara moves through our makeshift home with a quiet authority. She used to be a nurse, and she tends to the sick with a practiced hand, cleaning a child's scraped knee with a bit of scavenged antiseptic and a clean rag. Her faith in me is absolute, which makes her the perfect enforcer of my rules. When my duties are done, I retreat to my private space, a small alcove behind a collapsed section of shelving in the non-fiction aisle. Here, I am not Jeremiah. Here, I am Daniel Ashcroft, a 42-year-old failure. My holy text is not a stone tablet, but a dog-eared film script for Ashen World, its pages soft and gray from constant handling. My notes are scrawled in the margins, survival tactics I researched for months to get into character. Water sources, edible plants, how to read weather patterns. These are the sources of my divine visions. I spread an old paper map on the floor. My hands tremble as I trace the blue line of a creek bed that my research told me should still hold water. It is almost dry. Our main well is nearly exhausted. The pressure is a physical thing, a tightness in my chest. I need a new prophecy, a new direction, but my notes are thin for this specific area. I flip through the script, my fingers brushing past production notes. I stop on a page detailing the on-set requirements for the movie star, Rex Vanguard. He had demanded a fortified, self-sufficient trailer compound with its own deep-water well and solar array, all to be built at the remote filming location, a place called Pinnacle Studios. I find it on the map, a small circled area miles away. A fool's hope. The tremor in my hand grows worse, a betrayal of the calm authority I project. The lines of the map begin to blur before my eyes. For the first time, my research offers no clear path forward, no easy answer to whisper to my flock. The next vision might not come. Marcus is the reason everything breaks. He is a thick-shouldered man whose wife is growing weaker each day, and his fear is curdling into doubt. I see it in the way he watches me, his eyes narrowed, searching for a crack in the performance. He thinks I am stalling, that my visions are conveniently small. He wants a miracle, and he is willing to force one. It happens near the water filter. A small group is arguing over rations, a common enough occurrence. Marcus moves to intervene, his voice louder than necessary. He stumbles as he passes the large ceramic filter, our only tool for making the dwindling well water safe. His arm swings out, and he collides with the delicate apparatus. It topples over with a sharp, ugly crack that cuts through every other sound in the library. "It was an accident," he says, but he does not look sorry. The filter lies in two pieces on the dusty concrete floor. The last few drops of clean water seep out and disappear. Silence falls over the great room. We have 2 days of drinkable water left, maybe 3, and then every head turns to me. 30 pairs of eyes, wide with terror and a desperate, demanding hope. Their faces ask the question my soul cannot answer. Save us, prophet. Dehydration is a slow, ugly death that will turn my flock into a panicked mob. Staying here is a death sentence, but leading them out into the wasteland on a guess, on a half-remembered production note from a movie script, is just as likely to kill them, and it will surely expose my lie. When the first child dies of thirst under my guidance, they will tear me apart. The performance will be over. That night, I sit in my alcove with only a candle for light. The flickering flame makes the words on the script writhe like living things. Ashen world. It was supposed to be my masterpiece, the role that proved my dedication was worth the sacrifice of my marriage, of my relationship with my daughter. Now, it is a book of lies that is keeping 30 people alive. I look at the map, at the circle around Pinnacle Studios, a fortress of glass and steel. A deep-water well. It is a long shot, a mad gamble, but it is the only shot I have. The alternative is to walk out into the main room, to tell them my name is Daniel Ashcroft, and to watch the order I have built dissolve into chaos as they fight over the last drops of water. I cannot do it. The lie is better than that truth. The performance must go on. I stare at the point on the map, then at the desperate sleeping forms in the main room of the library. Confess and watch them die in here, or lead them on one last impossible pilgrimage and watch them die out there. I close my eyes. I make my choice. By the second day, the thirst is real. Children are crying. Marcus has started to talk openly, suggesting they split up, that each family should take its own chances. He says that waiting for a vision is waiting to die. The flock is fraying, the threads of their faith snapping one by one. I know I have to act. I walk into the center of the library, my steps unsteady. I let my eyes roll back in my head, a trick I learned for a role as a mad king years ago. I stagger, then collapse to my knees with a loud cry that echoes in the high-ceilinged room. Marcus falls silent. Every eye is on me. I begin to speak, my voice a strained, guttural whisper that grows in power and volume. I speak of a vision that is burning behind my eyes. I describe a fortress of glass and steel, a place untouched by the flash fire. I tell them of a well of life that springs from the deep earth, a source of water that will never run dry. My body trembles, and my voice breaks with manufactured emotion. It is the performance of my life, delivered to the most important audience I have ever had. It works. Their fear is replaced by awe. Their doubt is washed away by a new wave of desperate hope. Marcus stares at me, his mouth agape, the seeds of his rebellion withered by the heat of my conviction. An hour later, we are ready. The last of our supplies are packed into bundles and bags. The library, which has been our sanctuary for months, is now just an empty, dusty shell. I stand at the shattered main doors, the Jeremiah persona fully in control, a mask I cannot afford to remove. I look out at the pale, dead light of the world outside. I have saved them from their own fear, but I have also led them out of the only home they have known, into a wasteland that does not care about prophecies. The pilgrimage was a thing of grit and silence. We moved through the husks of suburbs where rusted cars sat like sleeping beasts on cracked asphalt. The sky was the color of old bruises, a permanent smear of brown that choked the sun and made the world feel like the inside of a tomb. Every step kicked up a fine powder that coated our tongues and settled deep in our lungs. I walked at the head of my flock, my staff a prop I had found, my face a mask of serene certainty I had practiced for months in a broken mirror. Inside, my heart was a frantic bird beating against my ribs. The script had given me survival tactics, not a map, and I was leading 30 souls based on a half-remembered location scout from my life before. We were cutting through a ruined shopping plaza when they appeared. They stepped from the shattered fronts of stores, moving without a sound, their faces blank. There were a dozen of them, dressed in gray rags, each carrying a heavy bag. They formed a silent line that blocked our path. I held up a hand, and my flock froze behind me. These were the archivists, a group we had only heard whispers of, people who hoarded the physical remnants of the old world's knowledge. Their leader, a tall woman with bone-white hair, stepped forward. Her eyes were not hostile, just empty. They scanned my people, then settled on me. She pointed a long finger at the leather-bound script I kept tucked in my belt. "You trade in lies." Her voice was a dry rasp, like stones scraping together. "The world broke because of stories. Your belief is just another story." Panic was a cold liquid in my stomach. She did not want our food or our water. She wanted to dismantle the very thing holding us together. I was Daniel Ashcroft, actor, and this was an improvisation for my life. I bowed my head, affecting the humble grace of Jeremiah. I spoke of visions and faith, but her face remained a stone tablet. She took another step, and her gaze fell upon a cart. One of my followers was pushing, a cart piled with scavenged books we had deemed too heavy to carry further, meant to be left behind. Among them was a complete 20-volume set of encyclopedias, their spines faded. Her eyes fixed on them. I saw the flicker of something, a kind of covetous hunger. This was my opening. I projected the voice of the prophet, a voice of sacrifice. I told her that truth had many forms, and that we would offer a tribute of pure knowledge, a gift to honor her dedication to preserving the truth of what was. I gave away the real knowledge, the encyclopedias, to protect my fabricated one. She considered this for a long moment, her empty eyes boring into me, and then she gave a single, sharp nod. Her people stepped forward, took the heavy books from our cart, and melted back into the ruins as silently as they had appeared. We were alive, but the encounter had left a chill. As we began to move again, a man named Thomas walked beside me, his face troubled. "If your visions are true, Jeremiah," he asked, his voice low so only I could hear, "why didn't you see them coming?" 2 days later, the slickfall began. It was not rain, not really. It was a greasy, black drizzle that sizzled where it touched the ground and smelled of chemicals and rot. It stained clothing and burned the skin. We found shelter in the echoing dark of a collapsed parking garage, a concrete cave where the wind wailed through broken walls. The close confinement frayed everyone's nerves. The coughing started. The low murmurs of doubt grew louder, and the fear was a palpable thing in the damp air. On the second night, I thought I was alone. I had found a corner away from the others, curled into myself, and the performance finally cracked. The prophet Jeremiah dissolved, and I was just Daniel, a failed man terrified of the dark, certain we were all going to die in this concrete coffin. My shoulders shook with silent, racking sobs. I pressed my face into my knees, trying to stifle the sound, a pathetic animal caught in a trap of my own making. Then I felt a presence. I looked up and saw Ilara standing there, her thin frame silhouetted against the weak light from our single lantern. She was watching me, her expression unreadable. I saw my entire world ending in her gaze, the whole lie exposed by a moment of simple human weakness. But she saw something else. I watched her face soften, her eyes filling not with scorn, but with a profound, sorrowful awe. She thought my terror was a holy burden, the weight of a divine connection too terrible for a mortal man to bear. The next morning, when the slick fall had stopped and Thomas began to voice his doubts to others, Ilara stepped into the center of our group. Her voice, usually so gentle, was like steel. She spoke of the prophet's sacrifice, of the terrible price he paid to see the path for them. She shamed them for their weak faith, her words a whip that drove them back into line. She saved me. She saved the performance. And in doing so, she pushed me even deeper into the lie. The walls of Pinnacle Studios rose from the rubble of the city like a promise. They were high and concrete, topped with wire, a fortress against the broken world. We were nearly out of water, our bodies gaunt, our hope a flickering ember. The flock gathered at the massive steel gate, looking up at the silent walls as if they were the gates of heaven. This was the place from my vision, the fortress of glass and steel I had promised them. It was real. For a moment, even I believed. Then a figure appeared on the catwalk above the gate. He was clean. That was the first thing I noticed. His hair was cut short, his clothes were practical and whole, and he moved with an easy confidence that seemed alien in this world. He leaned on the railing, looking down at us, at my flock of desperate, dusty believers. And I knew him. My blood went cold. It was Rex Vanguard, the megastar, the man who built his career on an image of unbreakable competence, the man who had despised my method acting on the set of Ashenworld. He assessed us for a long moment, his eyes lingering on our discipline, our numbers. He saw an asset. A predatory smile spread across his face, and he raised a hand, shouting an order to someone unseen. With a deep groan of metal, the gate began to slide open. My people gasped, tears of relief streaming down their filthy cheeks. They stumbled inside, a wave of desperate humanity pouring into the sanctuary. I was swept along with them, my mind screaming. Rex walked down a set of steel stairs to meet us, his grin a slash of white in the gloom. He stopped in front of me, his gaze full of condescending amusement. "Danny boy, you look like hell," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Still acting, I see." The gates slammed shut behind us, the sound a final, booming note of imprisonment. The flock was celebrating their deliverance, but I saw Rex for what he was. He was not a savior. He was a zookeeper who had just acquired a new exhibit. Rex let us drink from the well, a deep, clean source of water that felt like a miracle. He let us rest. Then he began his work. It started with Marcus's son, a boy of 8 who had a deep, infected gash on his leg. The flesh was red and swollen, and a fever was burning through him. I could only offer Jeremiah's prayers, laying my hands on the boy's head and speaking words of comfort from the script. It was all I had. Rex watched from a distance. The next morning, he gathered everyone near the well. He was direct and practical. He told them that faith was a fine thing for the soul, but a fever needed medicine. He announced he was leading a small, armed party to a derelict pharmacy a few miles away. It was dangerous, he said, but it was a real solution. He looked directly at Marcus, then at the rest of my flock, framing it as a choice between action and prayer. Marcus, his face a mask of paternal anguish, did not hesitate. He knelt before Rex, not me, and pledged to go, to do whatever it took to get the medicine for his son. Others, swayed by the promise of something tangible, something real, joined him. Rex clapped me on the shoulder as his new followers prepared for the raid. The gesture was meant to look like camaraderie, but his grip was like steel and his smile never reached his eyes. "Prophets who can't make it rain have a funny way of getting lost on supply runs, Danny," he whispered, his voice for my ears alone. "Don't get lost." The boy's fever spiked that night. He was delirious, his breathing shallow. The prayers had done nothing. The choice was no longer abstract. Rex's raiding party was leaving at dawn. Marcus and his wife stood over their son, their hope draining away with every ragged breath he took. They chose Rex. They chose the raid. And when they walked over to his group, more than half of the flock went with them, their faces a mixture of guilt and grim determination. They chose the man with the guns and the plan. Only a few remained with me, their faith now looking more like foolishness. Ilara was not among them. She came to me as I stood alone, the prophet abandoned on his stage. Her face was pale. Her eyes were hollowed out by a pain deeper than any I had seen in her before. "He said you were an actor, that Ashenworld was a movie. Please," she begged, and her voice broke, a fragile thing shattering in the quiet compound. "Tell me it's not true." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I tried to summon Jeremiah, to find the lines, the voice, the unshakable certainty. But there was nothing left. I was Daniel Ashcroft, a fraud, and I could not meet her eyes. I could only offer a weak, stammering noise that was worse than any confession. I saw the belief in her eyes die. It was not a sudden extinguishment, but a slow, cold fading, replaced by a profound, soul-deep disgust. She turned without another word and walked toward Rex's group, her back rigid with betrayal. The sound of her footsteps on the gravel was the only sound in the world, each one a nail being driven into my coffin. My world did not collapse with a roar, but with that quiet, final sound of someone walking away. I wandered the studio lot like a ghost. I was nothing. Jeremiah was gone, and Daniel Ashcroft was a man I barely remembered. By sheer chance, I found the trailer, my trailer, tucked away behind a large soundstage. The door was unlocked. Inside, it was stale and silent, a preserved slice of the life I had destroyed. I looked in the cracked bathroom mirror and saw a stranger, a gaunt, filthy creature with haunted eyes. It was my face. I didn't recognize it. On a small table, buried under a layer of grime, were some old papers, call sheets, a revised scene, and a crumpled safety memo for Soundstage 4. I smoothed it out. It was a schematic, a crude drawing of the rigging for the big subway collapse stunt, the film's climax. My eyes traced the lines showing cables and supports. I remembered the stunt coordinator, a man named Sal, walking me through the sequence, showing me the fail-safes. My finger stopped on a circled notation, the ink faded but still legible. It read, "Critical, fail, point, release, lever." I held the crumpled paper in my hand. Sal's voice echoed in my memory from a world away. "It's a beautiful death gag, a 1-in-a-million shot. You pull this lever, and the whole thing comes down." I looked up at my reflection in the mirror again. I was not a prophet. I was not a leader. I was just an actor who knew the set better than anyone else. An actor who knew exactly how to stage a scene. A desperate, impossible idea began to form in the ruins of my mind. I stood there in the silence of the trailer, the schematic in my hand, a thin, brittle ghost of a world that was gone. The paper felt real, more real than any prophecy I had ever spoken. Outside, I could hear the sounds of Rex's group getting ready, the clink of metal and the low murmur of orders. They were leaving for the pharmacy, a trip designed to secure Rex's power and thin the herd of anyone still loyal to the idea of me. This was my only chance. The performance had to end, and the real man, the one I had hidden for so long, had to finally step onto the stage. I stripped off Jeremiah's foul rags, the layers of sweat and grime and falsehood. In a locker, I found a pair of stiff work pants and a dark gray shirt left behind by some long-dead crew member. They were clean. They felt strange against my skin. I looked in the mirror one last time at the haggard face of Daniel Ashcroft, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of the man I used to be. I walked out of the trailer and into the pale, dusty light. A few of them were still there, maybe 6 or 7, huddled near the well, looking lost. Ilara stood apart from them, her arms wrapped around herself, her back to me. She was looking toward the gate where the others were assembling under Rex's command. She did not turn when I approached. I stopped before the small group, my heart hammering against my ribs. I held up the script in one hand and the map in the other. "He's right," I said. My voice was not the prophet's resonant boom, but my own, cracked and quiet. "My name is Daniel Ashcroft. I'm an actor." The prophecies were research for a role I was playing in a film called Ashen World. A few of them gasped. Most just stared, their faces blank with a confusion that went deeper than shock. I dropped the script to the ground. That part was a lie, but the need to survive was not.